course. Okay. So what I wanted to spend some time tonight talking to you guys about is the work of Robert Marzano. So how many of you guys, just raise your hand or nod your head or something, how many of you have ever studied or looked at the work of Robert Marzano? Okay, so for some of you, it's a familiar name. For some of you, it's not. Robert Marzano is a very well-known researcher and educational sort of guru. And he is best known for his work on effective teaching practices and helping to build like academic vocabulary and some of those things. But what I wanted to specifically talk to you guys about tonight is what's called the guaranteed and viable curriculum. And this is actually taken from a 2003 book that Robert Marzano wrote called What Works in School, Translating Research into Practice. So one of the things that I really like about Marzano's work is that it's very practical. He's one that takes you from theory and research into practicality. So like I said, he is definitely somebody that is a name you might want to look at and use as you think about leadership in the future. So if you accept the idea that the most important thing that we need to do in schools and as leaders is to improve student achievement, the question becomes, how do you go about doing that effectively? So we've spent a lot of time in this course so far talking about curriculum and standards and how you go about unpacking them, how you map out an effective curricular plan, etc. But I think the real question comes down to, how do you know if it's a quality curriculum? You know, you can have a curriculum that looks really good on paper, but if it's not impacting student achievement, then I would challenge you whether or not it is really effective. So tonight, specifically, I wanted to talk about what does it mean to have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, and then how do we know if it's a quality curriculum or not. So let's talk first about what it means when we say a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So you guys chime in. What do you think I mean when I say guaranteed? Any ideas?
Everybody gets access to it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever had the experience either as a teacher, and Joseph's right, as a teacher or maybe as a parent, where you notice that you know, parents really want everybody, all of the children to be in Miss, you know, Smith's class because, you know, Miss Smith is a great teacher, she gets great results, etc. But they're not as enthusiastic about maybe being in Miss Wilson's class because she's not considered quite as effective. The idea that Marzano puts out about a guaranteed curriculum is that no matter what, it doesn't matter who your teacher is or even which school you're in within a system, everybody is going to have access to the same curriculum, and it is guaranteed or it's assured that curriculum is going to be the same across schools, across grade levels, and across teachers. In his book, Marzano talks a lot about as well that all students have an equal opportunity to learn. So, you know, I'll go back to my days many years ago when I was an elementary principal. And one of the things we noticed when we started really delving into our curriculum was the fact that certain units were being taught every single year in every single grade level. And quite frankly, these were units that the teachers really liked and the kids liked. And, you know, if they were to stand alone, they were highly effective. But when you started looking at how curriculum aligned with the assessments, we found out very, very quickly that these sort of favorite units really only needed to be taught within probably kindergarten or first grade. So some of you may have heard the example of dinosaur curriculum. You know, the kids all learn about dinosaurs in kindergarten and first grade, and somehow they're still being taught about dinosaurs in fifth grade. But we had some of those problems and issues. So it is very, very important that we think about not only what is guaranteed, but also what is it that our students have the opportunity to learn. The other part of it as well is, lots of research has been going on recently about what makes student achievement rise. And, guys, the most important element, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is an effective or highly effective teacher. One of the things that when, the last couple of years I was working in Dallas ISD, they were moving towards a pay-for-performance plan. And I just read a really interesting article that it's actually working, despite a lot of issues and concerns. But the whole idea was that we wanted to, in Dallas, pay our most effective teachers, regardless of tenure or seniority, degrees, anything like that. But teachers who really got results should be compensated at the highest levels possible. The other thing that we knew when we found out was they had done a lot of research about what happens to students when they're with effective teachers versus when they're with less effective teachers. And I think the most horrifying statistic that came out of all of that research was the fact that if a student has an ineffective teacher or a not very effective teacher for 2 consecutive years, they lose so much student achievement that they never recover. So if you have a highly ineffective teacher in 1st and 2nd grade, you will never recover what you lose in terms of achievement and knowledge and success and all of those kind of things. And those were the students who ended up being our dropouts, our non-graduators, our non-completers, etc. So having an effective teacher is absolutely essential. And as you think about going into leadership, that's going to be one of the most important things that you do. So we want to provide teachers with that guaranteed and viable curriculum, and we also want to do everything we can to make them be as effective as possible. The other part of it too is that curriculum has to be both horizontally and vertically sequenced and aligned. And the reason you have to do that is so you avoid those repetitive kinds of units that teachers tend to teach over and over and over. So for example, if you're still teaching main idea in 4th or 5th grade, we have a problem. Kids learn what main idea is in 1st and 2nd grade. We don't need to keep reteaching stuff they already know. Most of the curriculums that I've ever reviewed, and I've looked at many, are quite honestly, they're too full. There's more in there than teachers can teach, and then more than they can teach effectively. So we have to get really smart about making sure that across grade levels or across content that we're not repeating things kids already know. We need to eliminate some of those things and make it more effective. We also, as we've talked a lot about curriculum as part of this course, we're going to kind of shift starting next week to talking more about assessment. But another critical piece, according to Marzano, is that all assessments should be data-driven. So how many of you, just raise your hands, have had that experience where, the principal opens up the school year and they go through all the data from last year's test results? Yeah, pretty much everybody. I'm guilty. I've done it as a principal. That's good in a sense because sometimes we get to celebrate, sometimes we get to look at those areas that we need to grow on, but guys, that's historical data. And if you're I'll pick a grade level, let's say you're a 7th grade teacher and you have a new batch of 7th graders. Why are we looking at last year's 7th grade data? Not the same kids, not the same group. We're comparing 2 different sets of individuals. It's more helpful if the 8th grade teachers look at the 7th grade data and the 7th grade teachers look at the 6th grade data because those are actually the cohorts of students that they're teaching. But we don't often do that. We tend to look grade level to grade level or across particular content tests. It's much more helpful that instead of spending time with historical data that we create and use current data to drive our assessments. So whether it's that diagnostic data that's going to help you decide what you need to teach and what you don't, or it's that formative assessment that's done as part of effective teaching, those 2 pieces of information are much more helpful to us than reviewing last year's scores. Like I said, I'm not saying you just ignore them. You know, hopefully you get to celebrate some great successes from it and to delve a little bit deeper into what worked and what didn't. But if you really want to impact current student achievement, you have to be looking at current data and making sure that that data or data, depending on how you say it, is really driving your assessment. So I want you to stop and think for just a minute. How often, and you know, you guys chime in, how often do you sit with your principal or your team in a PLC and talk about formative or summative current assessment data?
Every single week.
Okay, awesome. That's great, Ty. You're in a good school. You've got an effective leader. I think, Sally, you chime in too?
Every week.
Okay, awesome.
Every Thursday.
Awesome. That's encouraging.
We're not a great school. We're a D school, but we're really, really trying to change that. So hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully it'll work. And, you know, keep in mind too, guys, a lot of times those letter grades that you get for schools are really an indication of the population you serve, not always about effective teaching. You know, I know when Texas went to letter grades, of course, the schools that were very affluent or, you know, didn't have a very high low SES population, or they weren't Title I schools, et cetera. You know, of course, they always got, you know, great scores. They got A's all the time. Schools that had a lower socioeconomic population and had some of those struggles, particularly urban kinds of issues, tended to score lower. I wish that I don't think Louisiana has plans to do this, but what they should be looking at is growth data as opposed to standards-based or, I'm at a loss for the word, but you know, they really should be looking at how far you're growing kids. You know, and if you grow them a year or more from where they are, then that's a successful school. It's not a matter of just passing at a certain level or standard. But I don't think we're quite there yet. Okay. Anybody else have a different kind of experience?
I just wanted to kind of chime in on that last part with the value added. Louisiana had kind of moved to a value added model a few years ago, but it was only for certain core teachers that were, you know, standardized, tested. But it was like a formula that nobody understood either.
Well, of course.
Yeah, everybody would say, like, there's one guy in Baton Rouge who knows this formula and he can explain it, but he's the only one. But this year, I know middle school and high school, and I think in elementary schools too, there is a new category for school SPS for assessment indices that's a growth to mastery. And that looks at individual students and says, okay, this student was this far from the mastery level of achievement on this subject standardized test. We want to see them move this close to that mastery level, like to have like some sustained growth. And even if students don't meet those growth targets, there's like an option too.
Right.
Where they look at what are some categories that the student falls in. Is this student low SES? Is this does the student have disabilities? You know, what zip code is the student? How many days of school has the student missed?
Yeah, absolutely. That's all impact.
Students who meet those same criteria, and then gauges what percentile that student's growth would measure at compared to others. It's really interesting and kind of a promising like step in the right direction. I think that's like really trying to compare apples to apples and looking at cohorts instead of like, did seventh grade raise this year?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, in an ideal world, if we're going to continue to be so accountability driven, value-added models, and thank you, Jessica, for the verbiage I was looking for. Value-added models really, I think, do provide us with a better picture of how our kids are doing as well as how our teachers are doing. You know, I know in Dallas, and gosh, they've been doing this for 20 some odd years, they have what they call the effectiveness indexes or indices. And those indices, you got one for the school as a whole, but then each individual teacher got what was called a classroom effectiveness index. And it was based solely on value added. And so, you know, the schools that many people would look at and think, oh gosh, those are not very good schools because they didn't, you know, they weren't getting the highest marks in our state accountability system, really were doing amazing work because they were moving kids 2 and 3 years every year in student achievement. So, you know, hopefully we're going to get better and smarter at all of this over time, you know, but at the same time, I'm also hoping too, someday we quit testing our babies to death, you know, and driving our teachers crazy too. Other thoughts or ideas? Anybody else want to chime in before we move on? Okay, the other piece that I want you to start thinking about as our future leaders of campuses and schools, you know, we talk all the time about all these things teachers need to do, but we fail to sort of, I think, address the elephant in the room, and that's time. You know, teachers work ridiculous hours. They're asked to do things that are beyond, you know, reason even sometimes. I know you're counselors and nurses and parents and cheerleaders and mentors and counselors and facilitators and coaches and, you know, you name it, and teachers are asked to do it. But one of the most critical things that if you want there to be student achievement is allow your teachers time to plan and to work and to think. You know, I am a huge advocate of professional development that is meaningful and useful, as opposed to the sit and get kinds of things that are traditionally done. I also don't think it's very helpful usually to send teachers off to workshops, you know, because if you're the typical person, you go off and you learn all these things and you come back highly motivated and I'm ready to do this and all, and then real life sets in and many of those ideas sort of go by the wayside. So if we really want our students to be successful, we have to, as I said, use all of our available time to let our teachers work together and collaborate and work on curriculum. We also have to be realistic. So, you know, when you go through and look at blueprints for state assessments and you're doing curriculum alignment, obviously those particular standards that are tested the most should be those that are taught most heavily in your curriculum. You know, some people, in fact, a principal that I have great respect for, he and his teachers worked their curriculum so they taught all content by the end of the first semester. And then before the state assessment in the spring, they would go back and spiral and go deeper and have more depth and complexity on those critical or high stakes standards. And his school did very, very urban school district, at-risk population, Title I school, I think like 96% low SES percentage. You know, they had everything in the world going against them, but they are consistently a top performing school. But they were able to condense the curriculum into those things that matter and then teach those other skills that the kids really needed the second semester. So there's a lot of creative and innovative ideas, but any way that you can create time is going to be really, really helpful. You know, if you are a teacher leader currently at your campus, you know, I would encourage you to talk to your principal about rethinking professional development and letting it be something that is truly meaningful and useful. So a lot of this stuff I'm going to kind of skim through because a lot of it is stuff that we've already talked about, and I don't want to bore you guys with that. But just to kind of reiterate, so there are, I think, 5, if I remember right. Let me just double check. No, I'm sorry, I was wrong. 6. There are 6 indicators of whether or not a curriculum is effective. So these are 6 that you might want to know. They are in the presentation, so you don't have to necessarily write them down. They are in the PowerPoint, starting with, let's see, how many slides? I think it's like slide number 10, 11. So first of all, your curriculum for your school or your school system and the accompanying assessments must adhere to state and district standards. So remember, standards. You got to know them, you got to understand them, you got to unpack them, you have to use them. So that is a very critical piece of it. So for example, let me give you one. You might want to analyze the written curriculum and make sure that it correlates with your district and state standards effectively, okay? A lot of curriculum, and you know, I don't know. People think that when you get your district curriculum that it's perfect. As a former person who led curriculum writing and development, it's never perfect. If anybody tells you this is the perfect curriculum, you need to probably slap them or laugh in their face. Curriculum should be a dynamic and growing and changing document at all times. And, you are the experts in your classroom. You know your kids better than anybody else does. So, be selective. But if it doesn't, and I've seen some really crazy stuff, guys. I'm going to be honest. Like I remember one very profoundly. It was an AP curriculum that we were using. And, everybody thought, oh, this is the best curriculum in the world. Well, it completely missed some of the standards. They weren't even included in the curriculum that were covered on the AP test. So you have to be, like I said, a very discerning consumer. Secondly, the curriculum is focused enough that it can be adequately addressed in the time available. So, if you've got the first semester, you've got 90 days in the semester to teach, and we give you 210 days worth of curriculum, that's an unrealistic and impossible expectation. So, pick and choose. Be, like I said, discerning consumers and look for and use those high stakes standards first and foremost. And where you can, bundle them together. My background is special education, but also English and literacy. So, it drives me crazy when people talk about we're going to do reading, then we're going to do writing, then we're going to do vocabulary, and then we're going to do spelling. You know what? You can bundle all those standards together because we all know, particularly if you're, know anything about balanced literacy, writing and reading, vocabulary, etc., cannot exist in isolation. They should all be taught together. That's the most effective way to do it. So there is a way to go about making that happen. Third, make sure that all students have the opportunity to learn the critical content of the curriculum. Oftentimes we tend to modify the curriculum for our special education students. There's a difference between modified curriculum and accommodated curriculum. So if you have a learning disabled child in your class and they're 2 to 3 years behind grade level, that doesn't mean that they're still not taught the same standard. They just may be taught it in a different way or at a lower level. So it's really important, though, that everybody has access to the same curriculum. Number 4, we need to make sure that there are clear and measurable goals and that it does focus on those critical needs for our students. Oftentimes we just start teaching and we start on day 1 and we hope and pray that we cover everything we need to by the time of the state assessment. I know none of you are these kind of teachers, but unfortunately I've worked with several teachers in my career that they started on page 1 of the textbook and their goal was to complete the textbook with their students by the end of the semester or the term or the school year. And, that may have worked 35 or 40 years ago for some of us that are a little bit older, but it's really not an effective way to teach. So we have to make sure that we are setting goals not only for our classrooms and for ourselves as educators, but help your kids to set goals as well. And if they can master an objective ahead of the rest of the class, let them move on. Number 5, we analyze, interpret, and we use our data to progress monitor our students. I know you're going to get my bias a little bit on this one, but like I said, I hope that you guys are able to, and it sounds like some of you have some really strong principles, that you're using data that's useful to you as opposed to just a whole lot of data that people throw at you. Going back to my time in Irving and Dallas, we had more data than we could possibly ever use. I mean, it seemed like every time we turn around, they were throwing some new data piece at us, and not all of it's useful. So like you need to be a discerning consumer of curriculum, you need to be a discerning consumer of data as well. Not all data is helpful. Use what is going to help you to create what you need. Oh, somebody was asking too. Thanks. I see from Sally, and thanks, Joseph. Yeah, it's in the PowerPoint for tonight is in the notice that I sent you guys in the news forum today, and then I'll post it again in the documents and resources after tonight. Okay, last one, number 6. So we need to make sure that you can have a great curriculum, you can have a perfectly aligned assessment piece going on, you can be using your data effectively, all of those things. But if it's not implemented in the classroom the way that it should be, guess what? All for naught. Because the most critical thing, as we said, is a highly effective teacher in the classroom who is teaching the curriculum the way that students need to learn it. So if, this class doesn't really get into best teaching practices, that's done in some other programs, but, if you are looking for the best of the best instructional strategies and how to help and guide your teachers or to use yourself, I would highly recommend Marzano's work. Robert Marzano, like I said, is an amazing teacher, researcher, and he is really sort of the go-to person for effective teaching practices. So that kind of ends what I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight. Let me just look at my notes real quick and make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, I think we've got it. So the presentation for tonight does go into a little bit more detail about curriculum mapping and how you translate that into a unit plan, and then translate that from there into specific learning objectives and goals. But you guys are exemplary educators already, so I'm sure a lot of that's old news to you. But what questions or comments or concerns do y'all have tonight? Something weird. Okay. Hope that didn't affect y'all. How are your group projects going? Good? Okay. Yeah, I heard from Erin mentioned tonight, she's not in the Zoom meeting, but she was telling me that her group's almost done. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Okay, so I know that next week, how many of you guys have the week off for Thanksgiving? Everybody except me, and I'm really sad. So I'm going to go live on you next week, so don't forget, I haven't posted your assignments for next week yet. Quite honestly, some of you already know this too, I'm transitioning and moving. I'm not going to be working with the Masters of Education in Curriculum and Instruction anymore. I'm still keeping the Masters of Education Leadership, but I've also picked up the MHA program, the MPH program, and MSc, SSP, all kinds of, name an acronym, and it's probably going to fall under me now. So tomorrow we have this big deal advisory meeting, so it's been crazy for me all week, and my father's still in the hospital, and my husband's still, is from surgery, so anyway. Long story short, don't freak out because I haven't posted your assignments next week. I'm going to basically give you a week off, so you're not going to have to do reflection questions or forum post or any of that. So yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up. Yeah, I assumed you guys wouldn't mind that too much. So like I said, just enjoy your week. I know you guys need a break, and I'll just reduce the number of assignments and the number of points to earn your A's, which you should be fine with. Okay. Comments, questions, concerns, issues?
Just wanted to double check that for the group assignment, we need to be turning in 3 things, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Any concerns?
Are we having our meeting next week, or are you not going to do that?
No, there is no Zoom meeting next week. Thanks, Sally. That's a good question. No Zoom meeting. We normally meet on Thursdays, and quite frankly, I'm hoping by this time on Thursday night, I'm out doing my Black Friday shopping because that is my family tradition.
Did you want us to just submit all the group work as one PDF file, or how do you want us to submit that?
Honestly, whatever makes sense to you guys. If you want to do it as one file, that's perfect. If you want to do it as 3 separate files, that's fine too. Moodle is supposed to accept group submissions, but sometimes it gets messed up. So if you experience any challenges or difficulties, just email them to me, and also go in and upload your grades and stuff. But yeah, yeah, Erin, go ahead.
The 3 documents is the the two UBDs and the PowerPoint, or okay.
Yeah, it's the yeah, it's exactly what you just said. The PowerPoint, I can't speak all of a sudden. PowerPoint presentation, plus the two templates that I sent you guys. Or that are
Oh,
in
it's the two
in
UBDs.
Moodle.
I thought one of them was the unpacking the standard.
It is. It's unpacking the standard, but it was adapted from. I'm so brain dead tonight. Understanding by Design. It was adapted from that, so that's the one. So it's unpacking standards, the PowerPoint presentation, and then the UBD design template, I think it's called.
2.0.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Can we use Zoom to meet with our group?
You know, I thought you could, but unfortunately you have to have a subscription. So I think it was Aaron's group that I sent. You can do, what I would suggest doing is use Google Hangouts because it's actually a free resource. You don't want to have to pay for a Zoom meeting. And Google Hangouts is extremely simple. Just type into your web browser Google Hangouts. It'll come right up. And all you have to do is know each other's email addresses and you can join in. So if you need the link or something, Stacy, just send me an email and I'll send you the exact information.
We use Google Hangouts through my school system, so that'll be good.
Okay, so yeah, you're already an expert. But yeah, they started limiting the number of licenses because the last session that I taught, you know, I was able to let you guys get in through Zoom and do that, but they started limiting the number of licenses for LSUS, so I'm only given one this time. So.
And Tracy, we still haven't heard from a member in our group. How do you want us to handle that?
Go ahead and email me the person's name and I'll send you their personal email address and then I'll send them an email as well.
Okay.
So hopefully we can get everybody hooked in.
Okay.
Yeah, just so you guys kind of know, because I see the pattern. We have several students who don't log in or do anything till the weekends, and they don't respond to emails and stuff until then. So hopefully we can get everybody kind of hooked in though by tomorrow or Saturday. And if for some reason you have a group member who never responds, again, just let me know and I will handle them separately. And the group members that are working, just go ahead and submit things with just your names on it. Don't include their name. And I will grade you guys, but not penalize you for the lack of participation for somebody else. And usually what I do is I give the non-participant an alternative assignment that's really horrible that they don't want to do, because I do expect everybody to work together.
Well, we're planning to, you know, complete it in its entirety. We just wanted to know, you know, how we were just trying to get it done before Thanksgiving, so.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Definitely would want to get that done and out of the way. Okay. Anybody else? Well, I'm going to give you guys some time back tonight. So, you know, and unless you guys have other questions or concerns, it's 8:07 and we'll go ahead and close our meeting tonight. Okay. Thanks, guys. I'm going to turn off the recording. Hang on here.